The afternoon sun was fading behind the trees when Emily Parker unlocked the door of her late grandmother's old house. The house stood at the end of a quiet street in Ohio, surrounded by tall maple trees and falling leaves. The place smelled of dust, memories, and time. Emily had come there to clean the house before it was sold. She thought it would be easy, just boxes, old clothes, maybe a few photo albums. But as she walked inside, the air felt heavy, almost as if the house was still holding on to something unfinished. Her grandmother, Anna Parker, had passed away a few months ago. Everyone said she lived a peaceful life, quiet and simple. But Emily always felt there was more to her grandmother's story. There was something in her eyes, something that looked like a secret. As Emily climbed the old wooden stairs, each step made a long creak that echoed through the empty house. At the top of the stairs was the attic, her grandmother's favorite place when she was alive. Emily opened the small door and coughed as a cloud of dust filled the air. Inside were stacks of boxes, some labeled with years: 1969, 1972, 1974. Old furniture was covered with white sheets, and the smell of old paper filled the air. Emily switched on a small flashlight and began to open the boxes. There were letters, dresses, and photographs from decades ago. She smiled as she saw her grandmother's younger photos, laughing with friends, dancing, living. Then, something caught her eye. In a corner, under an old blanket, sat a small wooden chest, carved with the initials A.P. The lock was rusted, but Emily managed to open it using a hairpin. Inside were neatly folded papers, ribbons, and one yellow envelope, older than everything else. It looked untouched, its wax seal still there, and the handwriting faded but still clear. The letter was addressed to Anna Parker, and the sender's name at the top corner read James Miller. Emily frowned. She had never heard that name before. She sat down on the attic floor, holding the letter carefully. Her heart beat a little faster. Who was this man? Why did Grandma keep this for so long and never open it? Curiosity won. Emily broke the wax seal and slowly unfolded the fragile paper. The handwriting was shaky but full of emotion. She began to read. My dearest Anna. I don't know if you will ever read this letter, but I must write it. I must say what my heart can no longer hold. You were my world, Anna. My only reason to smile. But fate had other plans. They took you away before I could make you mine. If you ever forgive me, if you ever remember our promise, I'll be waiting. I'll be at the old train station on November 3rd. Every year, I'll wait there until you come. Forever yours, James. Emily read the letter again and again, her eyes wide. The old train station? Waiting every year? She looked at the bottom of the chest and found something else, a train ticket, dated November 3rd, 1974. It had never been used. Suddenly, the air in the attic felt colder. The light from the window flickered as the sun disappeared behind the clouds. A storm was starting outside. Emily whispered to herself, Grandma, who was James Miller? She walked downstairs, the letter shaking in her hands. The living room was silent, except for the sound of thunder far away. She sat by the window and read the letter one more time. Each word felt like a secret cry from the past. Her grandmother had always told her that love could be beautiful but painful. She often said, some love stories don't end, they just get lost in time. At that moment, Emily finally understood what she meant. Could this be the reason Anna never talked about her younger days? Was this letter a piece of a love story she wanted to forget, or one she could never let go of? Emily took a deep breath and looked outside. The rain began to fall, tapping softly on the glass. The sound mixed with the beating of her heart. She decided to search for clues. Maybe there were more letters, or pictures. Maybe this James Miller was real. Maybe he was still alive. Emily returned to the attic and opened the remaining boxes. In one of them, she found an old photograph, a young woman, smiling, standing next to a tall man with kind eyes. The back of the photo said, "Anna and James, 1973. Emily's hands trembled. So it was true. Her grandmother had loved this man deeply. As lightning flashed outside, she looked again at the letter and the train ticket. Something inside her told her this was not just an old love story. This was a mystery that had been buried for 50 years. She whispered, "Grandma, what really happened?" The house stayed silent, but the wind outside grew louder. Emily folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. She held the old photo close to her chest. That night, as she lay in bed, she couldn't sleep. The image of the young man's face stayed in her mind, and so did the words from the letter, "I'll be waiting at the old train station." She didn't know why, but she felt drawn to that place as if her grandmother's story was calling her to finish what had been left undone. The storm passed, leaving the sky calm and silver with moonlight. Emily got up, walked to the window, and looked out. She whispered softly into the night, "James Miller. I'll find out who you were." And as she said those words, a small breeze moved through the old house, fluttering the curtains almost like an unseen spirit had finally heard her. Emily didn't know it yet, but that forgotten letter would change everything she believed about love, loss, and destiny. The next morning, the sky was soft and gray. A cool wind blew through the old curtains as Emily Parker sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. The letter and the old photo lay in front of her. She hadn't slept much. All night, she had thought about the man named James Miller, the man who had waited at a train station 50 years ago for someone who never came. Her grandmother, Anna Parker, had always been kind but distant. She smiled often, but her eyes sometimes carried a sadness that no one could explain. Now Emily finally had a clue. She picked up the letter again and whispered, "Who were you, James? And why did Grandma never come to you?" The words from the letter still echoed in her head. "If you ever forgive me, I'll be waiting." Emily decided she needed answers. She called her mother, Linda, who lived 2 towns away. "Mom," she said, "I found something in Grandma's attic. A letter, from a man named James Miller. Do you know who that is?" There was a long silence on the other end. Emily could hear her mother breathing slowly. "Where did you find that name?" Linda finally asked. "In a letter. It was hidden in a chest. The letter was for Grandma. It sounds like he loved her, deeply." Linda didn't speak for a few seconds. Then she said quietly, "I'll come over." 2 hours later, Linda arrived. She looked older than Emily remembered, tired but graceful. When Emily showed her the letter and the photo, Linda's face turned pale. "I haven't seen this picture in over 40 years, she whispered, touching it gently. "So you knew about him?" Emily asked, her voice curious but soft. Linda nodded slowly. "I was very young when it all happened. Your grandmother never wanted to talk about it?" "But yes. James was real." "Who was he?" Linda took a deep breath. "He was the man your grandmother was supposed to marry." Emily froze. "What?" "Before she met your grandfather," Linda continued, "she was engaged to James Miller. Everyone said they were perfect together. But then something happened. Something terrible." Emily leaned forward. "What happened?" Linda looked away, her eyes full of old pain. "Your great-grandfather didn't approve of James. He thought James wasn't rich enough, not good enough for the family. He forced Anna to end it. And she did, but it broke her heart." Emily listened, speechless. She had always imagined her grandmother's life as simple and happy. But now it sounded like a love story that ended in heartbreak. "Did Grandma ever see him again?" she asked. Linda shook her head. "No. She married your grandfather soon after. But every year, on the same day November 3rd she would sit by the window and stare at the rain. She'd never tell anyone why. I used to think she was just missing someone. Now I know she was waiting for him, even if only in her heart. The room fell silent. Only the ticking clock could be heard. Emily stared at the letter again. It was dated October 28, 1974, just a few days before November 3, the date James said he would wait. So Grandma never got this letter, Emily said quietly. Linda nodded. Maybe it arrived too late. Or maybe she found it, but couldn't go. Emily's mind was racing. She looked again at the back of the letter, where faintly written words caught her eye. There was a smudge of ink that looked like a place name, Mapletown, Illinois. "Mom," she said, pointing at it, "look at this. Maybe that's where he was." Linda frowned. "Mapletown. I think your grandmother mentioned that name once, a long time ago. Maybe that's where he lived." Emily felt a strange pull in her chest. "I need to go there," she said. "I need to know what happened to him." Her mother looked surprised. "Emily, that was 50 years ago. He's probably gone." "Maybe," Emily replied. "But maybe he left something behind. A clue, a message, anything. I just feel like Grandma wanted me to find this." Linda sighed. She could see the determination in her daughter's eyes. "You're just like her," she said softly. "When your grandmother wanted answers, she never stopped until she found them." That night, Emily packed her bag. She placed the letter and the photograph safely inside. Before she left, she stood in her grandmother's living room one last time. The rain began to fall again, just like it had the night before. Emily looked up at her grandmother's framed photo on the wall. "I'll find out what really happened," she whispered. "I promise." The next morning, she started her journey to Mapletown. The road stretched out long and empty, surrounded by golden fields and old barns. The world felt quiet, almost as if it was listening. As she drove, she thought about the young couple in the photograph, Anna and James. They had dreams, plans, and love, and yet, something had torn them apart. Emily felt her heart ache for two people she had never met as a couple, but whose love story was now a part of her own life. The sun began to set when she finally reached the small sign that read "Welcome to Mapletown." It was a quiet place, old-fashioned, almost frozen in time. She stopped at a small diner by the road and showed the photo to an older waitress. "Do you know this man?" Emily asked. The woman adjusted her glasses, looked closely, and gasped softly. "Oh my, that looks like James Miller. He used to live here years ago. Such a kind man. Came to the train station every November, waiting for someone." Emily's heart skipped a beat. "He waited? Every year?" The woman nodded. "Yes, dear. Every year. Until he stopped coming a few years back." Emily swallowed hard. "Do you know what happened to him?" The woman sighed and pointed toward the end of the street. "You should go see Mr. Henry, the old postmaster. He knew James better than anyone. He might tell you what you're looking for." Emily looked out at the road, her heart pounding. The letter had led her here, and now, she was one step closer to uncovering the truth about the love her grandmother never spoke of. As she walked toward the post office, the wind blew softly through the trees, carrying the smell of rain and memory. Somewhere deep inside, she felt that the story wasn't over yet. In fact, it was only just beginning. The next morning, Emily Parker woke up early in her small motel room in Mapletown, Illinois. The air was cold and quiet, and a soft mist hung outside the window. She looked at her grandmother's old photograph once more, Anna smiling beside James Miller, and whispered, "I'm here, Grandma. I'll find him for you." She tucked the letter and photo carefully into her bag and stepped out into the sleepy little town. The streets were lined with old shops, faded signs, and wooden houses that looked unchanged for decades. Following the waitress's directions from last night, Emily walked to the small Mapletown post office. The bell above the door jingled as she stepped inside. Behind the counter sat an old man with silver hair and kind eyes. He looked up, curious. "Good morning, young lady. How can I help you?" "Good morning," Emily said softly. "My name is Emily Parker. I'm looking for someone who used to live here, a man named James Miller." The old man froze for a moment, his smile fading slightly. "James Miller, now that's a name I haven't heard in a while." Emily nodded. "People at the diner said you might know him." The old man sighed. "I sure did. I'm Henry Thompson, the postmaster here for over 50 years. James was a good friend of mine. He lived just a few blocks from here." Emily's heart quickened. "Do you know what happened to him?" Henry's eyes softened. "Yes, dear. But tell me first, why are you looking for him?" Emily hesitated, then took out the letter. "This was written by him. It was for my grandmother, Anna Parker." The old man's eyes widened. "Anna Parker," he whispered. "So you're her granddaughter?" Emily nodded. "You knew her?" Henry smiled sadly. "Only through James. He spoke of her often. Every year, on the same date, November 3rd, he'd come to the train station with a small bouquet of white roses. He'd sit on the same bench, waiting. Rain or shine, he never missed a year." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "He waited, for 50 years. Henry nodded slowly. "Almost. He kept believing she'd come back. Said she'd promised once. When people told him to move on, he'd smile and say, 'Love doesn't end just because time passes.'" Emily felt tears sting her eyes. "Did she ever come?" "No," Henry said softly. "He waited alone every year. Then one day, he got sick. The last time I saw him, he said, 'If I don't make it this year, and if Anna ever finds me, give her this.' He opened a drawer and pulled out a small wooden box, carefully wrapped in an old handkerchief. 'I kept this all these years,' Henry said. 'I guess I was waiting for her to come. But maybe it's meant for you now.'" Emily took the box with trembling hands. It was light, old, and carved with the initials A+J=forever. She whispered, "He really loved her, didn't he?" Henry smiled gently. "He did. He never stopped." Emily thanked him with teary eyes and left the post office. She walked down the quiet road toward the old train station Henry had mentioned. The station stood at the edge of town, silent and forgotten. The platform was cracked, the roof broken, and the paint faded. Yet, there was something peaceful about it, like time itself had stopped there, waiting too. Emily walked along the platform until she saw it, a bench, old and rusty, with carved letters on the back, A+J=forever. She touched the carving gently. Her heart ached as she imagined James sitting there every year, holding flowers, watching the trains pass by, hoping to see Anna again. She sat on the same bench, the letter and the box in her lap. The air was cold, and the wind carried the faint sound of a distant train whistle. "Grandma," she whispered, "he never gave up on you." She opened the small box carefully. Inside were 3 things. A silver ring, old but shining. A small photograph of Anna. And a folded piece of paper, James's handwriting once again. Emily unfolded it slowly and began to read. "My dearest Anna. If you ever read this, it means you found your way back. I kept the ring you once wore and the picture you gave me. I never stopped waiting, Anna. Even when people said I was foolish, I still believed love could find its way home. If time keeps us apart, I hope heaven brings us together. Yours forever, James." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she finished reading. She looked out at the empty tracks, imagining the young man who once stood there in hope, and the woman who never knew he was waiting. She whispered softly, I'm so sorry, James. The wind blew gently, almost like an invisible answer. A single white feather drifted down from the sky, landing beside her feet. Emily picked it up and smiled through her tears. For a moment, she felt something, a strange peace, as if James's spirit was finally resting. She looked at the horizon and saw the sun breaking through the gray clouds. The station seemed brighter, warmer. Emily sat there for a long time, holding the letter and the box. She felt like she had touched a love that refused to die, a love that had waited patiently for half a century. When she finally stood up to leave, she turned around one last time. The light hit the metal bench just right, making the carved initials shimmer faintly in the sun. A plus J equals forever. Emily smiled. Yes, she whispered. Forever. She walked away from the station, holding the box close to her heart. But deep inside, she knew her journey wasn't over yet. She still needed to take this story home to show her mother, and to let her grandmother's spirit finally rest. And as she walked down the quiet road, she didn't see the train station fade behind her, bathed in sunlight almost as if two unseen souls were sitting there again, side by side, smiling. The train ride back to Ohio was quiet. Emily Parker sat by the window, watching the landscape roll by, golden fields, small towns, and fading light. The small wooden box from Mapletown rested in her lap, as if guarding 50 years of love and pain. She couldn't stop thinking about what Henry, the old postmaster, had told her, how James Miller waited every year, never giving up. The thought broke her heart and filled it with warmth at the same time. When she reached her grandmother's old house, the evening sky had turned soft orange. She placed the box on the kitchen table, took a deep breath, and opened it again. Inside, she saw the things that had once belonged to a love story. A silver ring, shining faintly in the dim light. A black and white photograph of a young Anna smiling shyly at the camera. And a small leather diary, worn with age and tied with a thin ribbon. Emily's hands trembled as she untied the ribbon. The first page was dated November 3, 1974. It began in neat handwriting that slowly turned shaky toward the end. Anna didn't come. I waited all day. I told myself the rain might have stopped her, or that she was sick. But as the sun went down, I knew. She isn't coming. Still, I'll come again next year. Love doesn't just stop. It waits. Emily's eyes filled with tears. She turned the pages carefully. The next few entries were written on the same date, year after year. Every November 3, James returned to that same train station. 1975, the roses wilted before sunset, but I waited anyway. 1979, I saw a young couple today. They reminded me of us. 1986, I wonder if she ever got my letter. 1994, people say I should move on. But how do you move on from your soul? Each page felt heavier than the one before. The words carried both hope and loneliness, a man's love stretching across decades, never fading. Emily turned to the final pages. The handwriting was weaker now, almost trembling. 2001, news came today that Anna Parker has passed away. I don't know if it's true. My heart says it can't be. But if it is, I hope she found peace. I'll keep coming until I can't anymore. 2019, I'm too old to travel now. The station is far, my legs are weak. But every night, I close my eyes and imagine her stepping off that train, smiling the way she used to. If anyone ever finds this diary, tell Anna I never stopped waiting. Love doesn't end with time, it only hides in silence. By the time Emily finished reading, her tears had fallen onto the pages. She closed the diary gently and held it to her chest. Grandma, she whispered, he never stopped loving you. She sat there for a long time, lost in thought. The house was silent, but it no longer felt empty. It felt alive with memories, with voices from the past, with love that refused to die. When her mother Linda arrived later that evening, Emily showed her everything: the letter, the ring, the diary. Linda read the final pages slowly, her lips trembling. "I can't believe this," she whispered. "All those years, she kept it all inside." "She loved him, Mom," Emily said softly. "And he loved her his whole life." Linda nodded, wiping her tears. "Your grandmother never talked about James. But sometimes I'd see her staring at her wedding ring, like she was thinking about something else. Maybe she was remembering him." Emily looked down at the small silver ring in the box. "Maybe this is the ring he gave her," she said. Her mother smiled sadly. "Then it's finally home." For a while, neither of them spoke. They just sat there, the air filled with silence and peace. Then Emily said, "Mom, I want to visit his grave. He waited for Grandma all his life. The least we can do is tell him she never forgot him." Linda looked at her daughter for a moment, then nodded. "Yes," she said softly. "It's time to bring them together." The next morning, they packed the car and began their drive back to Mapletown. The road felt different this time, less lonely, more meaningful. When they arrived, Henry greeted them with gentle surprise. "You came back," he said with a kind smile. Emily explained why they were there. Henry's eyes grew moist. "His grave is near the old train station," he said quietly. "Under the oak tree. He wanted to be close to the place he loved most." They followed the small path behind the station until they saw it, a simple headstone, surrounded by wildflowers. It read, "James Miller, 1927 to 2023. Forever waiting." Emily knelt beside the grave. She placed the letter and the silver ring gently on the stone. The wind blew softly, rustling the grass around them. "James," she whispered, "Grandma didn't forget you. She just couldn't come. But she loved you, too. She really did." Her mother stood quietly beside her, tears glistening in her eyes. For a long time, they stayed there, saying nothing. The sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. And as they turned to leave, a small gust of wind lifted one of the wildflowers and carried it toward the old train station, almost like a final goodbye. Emily looked up at the glowing horizon. "He waited his whole life," she said softly. Her mother nodded. "And now, he doesn't have to wait anymore." But Emily didn't know something beautiful was still waiting for her at the station. Something that would prove love never truly dies. The air was cool and gentle as Emily Parker and her mother, Linda, walked away from James Miller's grave. The setting sun cast a golden light over Mapletown's old train station, painting everything in soft shades of orange and pink. They had come to return the letter and ring to close a story that began 50 years ago. But as Emily turned to look at the quiet station, she felt something deep inside her heart. It wasn't finished yet. She stopped walking. "Mom," she said softly, "can we stay for a while? Just a few minutes." Linda nodded, understanding. She could see the emotion in her daughter's eyes. Emily slowly walked back toward the train station. The place was empty, the wooden boards cracked, and the air filled with the distant sound of a train horn far away. She sat down on the old bench, the one with the carving A+J=forever. Her fingers traced the letters gently. The wood was rough, but the carving still stood strong, just like the love that created it. She looked out toward the empty tracks, imagining how James must have sat here, year after year, waiting. Maybe he brought flowers. Maybe he hoped to see Anna step down from the train, smiling like in the photo. Emily closed her eyes. The wind brushed her hair softly, and for a brief moment, she felt as if time had stopped. Then, something strange happened. A faint light appeared at the far end of the tracks. It shimmered, like the reflection of sunlight, but it was almost evening. The air grew warmer. The light slowly grew brighter until Emily could almost see two faint figures standing by the train tracks. A man and a woman. The man was tall, wearing a dark coat and holding white roses. The woman had gentle eyes and light-colored hair tied neatly, just like Anna's in her old photos. They were standing close, smiling at each other. Emily blinked, thinking maybe she was imagining it. But the figures didn't fade. Instead, they seemed to glow softly in the warm sunset. The woman reached out and touched the man's hand. They looked at each other like people who had waited a lifetime for that one moment. Then, slowly, they turned toward Emily. For a second, Emily felt her heart stop. She could almost feel her grandmother's presence, gentle, loving, and peaceful. Anna smiled at her, a small, grateful smile. Then the light around them grew brighter and brighter until it faded slowly into the wind. Emily sat frozen, her eyes wet, her heart full. "Goodbye, Grandma," she whispered. "You finally found him." Linda walked toward her, worried. "Emily. Are you okay?" Emily wiped her tears and smiled faintly. "Yes, Mom. They're together now." Linda looked around, confused, but she didn't question it. Something about Emily's voice sounded certain, like she had seen something real. As they turned to leave, a small photo fluttered down from Emily's jacket pocket, carried by the wind. It landed softly on the ground near the bench. Emily bent down to pick it up, but then she froze. It wasn't the photo she had before. It was new. It showed Anna and James, older now, sitting side by side on that same bench, holding hands and smiling at the camera. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She turned it over. On the back, written in elegant handwriting, were the words, "Together at last. Love never dies." Her hands trembled as she showed the photo to her mother. Linda gasped and covered her mouth. "Emily, how is that possible?" Emily smiled softly, her eyes glistening. "Maybe love finds a way to finish what life couldn't." They stood there quietly for a while, the cool wind moving around them. The evening light turned golden, and the air smelled of rain and roses. Before leaving, Emily walked back to James's grave one last time. She placed the new photo gently beside the ring and letter. "Rest now," she whispered. "You waited long enough." As she stood there, a sudden gust of wind lifted the edges of her hair and the petals of the flowers. The wind swirled gently around her, almost like two spirits dancing in the air. For a moment, she could swear she heard faint laughter, warm and familiar, before it faded into silence. She smiled and turned back toward her mother. As they drove away from Mapletown, Emily looked out the window at the fading sky. The stars were just beginning to appear, one by one. She thought about the letter, the diary, the love that had survived decades of silence. A story that started before she was born and somehow found its ending through her. Back home, she placed a copy of the photo and the letter in a frame beside her grandmother's portrait. Every time she walked by, she felt peace, not sadness, not loss, just peace. Sometimes, when the house grew quiet, she would look toward the window and imagine her grandmother sitting at the train station once more, not waiting this time, but smiling, finally free. And the next morning, as sunlight poured through the curtains, Emily whispered to herself, "Sometimes love doesn't end. It just waits, until it's remembered." They say true love never dies. It may fade, it may hide, but it never disappears. Sometimes, all it takes is one forgotten letter, to remind the world that love, real love, lasts forever.